Hey everybody, it's Jimmy and Bill. So today what we're talking about is the disappearance of the middle class. This is part two of two parts video, okay? So this is part two. Make sure you check out part one and I'll link it below. It's a really interesting article from the Wall Street Journal because it's a serious subject too because,
Right.
you know, according to this article, in 5 years, the average person, middle class person, is not going to be able to afford quite a lot of stuff.
Right. It was very interesting, and how the dynamics of what people in the survey defined as being middle class.
Right. So we're going to continue doing it, talking about it, and do me a favor, really consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. It's greatly appreciated. And hit the bell notifications and share this video. All right, Bill, let's start. So where we left off on the last one, why don't you recap a little bit of percentages? There was a survey done with Wall Street Journal.
Yep, there was a survey done, and they talked about how the people want, you know, what they made them feel like they were middle class. And I'll go in order here. So starting off at 93% was they had a secure job, the ability to save money for the future, the ability to afford emergencies of $1,000 and not have to put it on a credit card, ability to pay all bills on time without even having to really think about it.
Okay.
Having health insurance, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, and the ability to retire comfortably, which is kind of ambiguous. We don't really know what that means, but you know, it's, I think, by the personal definition. Having a job with paid sick leave.
Okay.
Time and money for vacations, own a home, the ability to eat at a restaurant whenever you want, and a college education, which came in super, super low.
Only 31%.
31%.
Think that's...
That makes, because that does not make you middle class. I'm sorry.
No, that doesn't make middle class at all.
No.
So,
No, we could go, that's a whole other video. I think we could go down on that.
So why don't you read the first couple of paragraphs?
All right. So just over a third of Americans meet all 6 markers to be middle class, as this article is
So
detailing out.
33% of the population meets middle class?
Meets middle class markers. So while it says that while 9 in 10 Americans had health insurance, only 3/4 had health insurance and a steady job. So
Really?
yeah, so that's probably more like the government stuff. Thank you. The government type insurance, you know, the, what's it called? The healthcare marketplace type stuff. You know, so that everybody could get the ability to have insurance, have health insurance. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
And then, so it continues on, is research often defined the middle class is based off of income. One commonly used definition from PEW Research Center sets middle class income between 2/3 and twice the national median income, which is, or $67,819 to $203,000 for a family of 4 in 2022. Most Americans consider the lower end of that range, $75,000 to $100,000, to be middle class, according to the poll. Because that's where I would say it too. If you were to literally just come up onto the street and I hadn't read this article, I would have probably gone that 60 to 100 range.
All right, okay, 75 to 100,000. Yeah, if you live in West Virginia, North Dakota, I'm not picking on any states, but you know, certain areas because I spent time there.
Right.
You know, okay, that I would consider middle class. But if you're in New York, especially the 5 boroughs, or California, anywhere in California.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth on this.
You know,
it depends on where you live.
Yeah, so you know, because the middle class in California, you might need $200,000.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is why they just took the median average. So that takes everybody's, you know, in the country, adds it up, divides it, and then that's where they came up with the median income. So I get where I mean, it's the only way we could really do it, I guess. But it makes sense. So 75 to 100.
All right, continue.
Even when looking at middle class income, Americans using PEW's more expansive range, the majority did not have the security associated with middle class. So meaning they didn't meet all those markers that they talked about. Those that did tended to be older, had higher incomes, and were more likely to have a college education and own their own home. So we'll pause there for a second.
All right.
Because this is kind of like one of those things. So they tended to be older. College was more prevalent
Sure.
back in the day, we'll say. We'll say back in the day. Because I'm older, so I can say that.
And it was more affordable.
And it was
too.
way more affordable.
Yeah, right now, and it wasn't.
Right.
And they were actually teaching back then.
Yeah. And
That's a little bit dig, but.
yeah, well, I mean, we're going to get into it. That's like, yeah, that could be another video in and of itself. But where they're kind of going with it, and just, you know, my opinion on this and in perspective, you know, you don't have to have a college education to make good money.
No.
Or even make really good money.
Right.
You know, there's tech schools, there's trade schools. You know, those are things that are in high demand that pay really, really well. So
Yeah,
I don't think a college education is something that you necessarily need. Now, I mean, you're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, you know, a pharmacist, something along those lines. Obviously, those type of jobs are going to lend themselves to college education.
Well, yeah, I mean, tradesmen, we're in short supply for welders.
That's what I mean.
Welders,
Right.
You know, very short.
Yeah.
Because, you know, right now, everybody wants to be like, so many people want to be like a YouTuber and just make money walking around and talking.
But, you know, there you go. There's one thing, you know, and I mean, these are trends. So obviously, you know, who knows where YouTube's going to go. It's not going to go away, but, you know, who knows how that's going to
Hey, I'm
pan
retiring,
out.
so I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
I paid my dues.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, I'm knocking on that door.
Yeah.
So, retired one's hitting for number 2. So I get it. Like, you don't need a college education to do things. While the Post poll found 60% of Americans considered homeownership essential to being middle class, homeowners over age 30 were more likely to be financially secure when comparing to people with similar ages and incomes, according to Federal Reserve survey.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Like when I was young in my 30s, I wasn't financially secure,
No.
you know?
Right. Like, I had a good job, but I started at the bottom.
And I spent money like crazy.
Yeah, and you bought dumb stuff. I did. I think everybody does. You know, but as you get more tenure in your profession or in the company that you're with, you know, logic states that you start making more and more money. So, because you have more experience.
I still buy dumb stuff, but now I have a wife that stops me from buying the dumber stuff. You know?
Exactly. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense.
All right, that makes sense.
So the most common barrier was a comfortable retirement. Sometimes about half of middle income Americans over 35 felt they were on track to receive. So only half of middle income Americans felt that they were on track to achieve a comfortable retirement. I get that. I understand.
When I was 35, I didn't really think. Can you hold on a second?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of thought about it. I mean, I really did think about it. They drilled that into our head, you know, at the firehouse, one of the old guys. They beat us with it. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, I have to work. Mm-hmm. You know, if I was to retire, so, you know, being able to retire young because you started young into the service is different. But that means you get out, you know, in your 40s, and then you most likely have to work, or you continue on a different type of path within, you know, the services. But yeah, if I had to retire, yeah, I wouldn't, if I was going out and said, hey, you have to retire today, Bill, and you're not allowed to work, I would not feel like I was ready, I don't think. Just because of the way the economy's going, everything's going. Inflation is growing so much faster than, you know, the money income. It's crazy. Oh, there's a lot of stats in this one.
Yeah, we can skip the stats.
We're gonna skip that.
But just read the paragraph
Yeah.
underneath.
So while the path to middle class financial security has become more complicated, the share of people with it has markedly declined over time. Since 2017, the earliest year of comparable data, between 32 and 40% of Americans met all 6 measures. Wow. With a low in 2017 and a high in 2021, which kind of makes sense too.
So basically, in the past, a lot of people met the definition of middle class.
Right.
And now that's kind of going away. Less and less people.
Yeah, only 32 to 40% met the definition of middle class. So less than half met the definition of middle class, with its low, the 32% in 2017, and its high in 21, 40%. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense. You know, it increased as, you know, the economy kind of ramped up there a little bit, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then 19-ish, then we had the pandemic.
Yep.
That changed, that shifted things a lot.
Oh, it did.
That really shifted, especially with these metrics that they're talking about.
It shook up everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It
So
definitely shook up everything.
yeah, for sure. So let's run over some of these stats real quick, just because it's interesting. So middle class income, percent of Americans that meet criteria in each income group. So Americans overall that meet all the criteria that we already went over was 35%. Lower income, 68,000, 16%. So they met all the criteria, with the exception of the income, where we said 70K. They met it at 68K. So that's only 60% of Americans, according to the study. And then middle income, 68 to 203,000. That's a pretty wide range, geez, 46%.
Oh, okay.
So that's where they're getting these numbers. And then the upper income, 203 or more, 203,000 or more, was 67%.
Oh, wow.
So, okay. But then health insurance overall was 91%, which makes sense totally. Availability to save was 87% overall. Steady job overall, 79%. Pay your bills, 71%. Comfortable retirement, 35 or older, was 51%, so 50-50. And then overall, pay an emergency of $1,000 without a card was at 56%. So it seems like everything's kind of like right down the middle, you know, with meeting the criteria. But that 206K or 203,000 range, that's huge. I mean, that was a big spread between 65K and then $200,000.
Yeah, but at the end of the day,
That's a world difference.
At the end of the day, okay, like part 1 of the video we were talking about, 5 years from now,
Right.
a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford, you know, the trips that they take now. They're not going to be afford the new cars, you know, and the cost of cars, cost of everything, inflation.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is, I'm not an economist at all. This is just my opinion, but if the feds, in my opinion, panic and they cut rates, it's going to boost up inflation.
Right.
But since, you know, a lot of big companies, I call it the silent laying people off, you know?
Yeah.
The news doesn't really talk about it, but I kind of follow it. I think that the feds are going to get scared and they're going to have to cut rates.
Well, now
It's a catch-22. They might not cut it in June, you know, but they will end up cutting it, you know?
right, and then just a little bit. We're not talking, you know, we've addressed this on other videos. They're not going to cut the rates just dramatically slash. You know, we need to get back to that slow, steady retraction, not
when
big
the
numbers.
Feds brought the rates down to 0, I knew we were in trouble.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, wow, this is great, you know? But they don't realize that it's just because we were in trouble.
Yeah.
That's why they brought it down to 0. But I don't know. I really think at the end of the day, 5 years from now, there's going to be the rich. They're going to stay rich. Because inflation doesn't really affect the rich.
No.
So they go to the supermarket and they spend an extra $100. Who
Big
cares?
deal.
They don't care. They still get the same thing.
Right.
But somebody that's middle class or you know, less than middle class
Yeah.
income wise, you know, that's a totally different story.
Right. You know, $100, $200, that's a big deal to most people. You know, when those things, especially when fixed income, when fixed expenses attack your income in that
So,
$100, $200 a month
what's your
range.
opinion that how's the middle class going to be 5 years from now?
It's going to be really tough. I think the definition of middle class is the swing's going to have to go up. You know, the pendulum's going the upside, because otherwise, you know.
If the definition of middle class comes that, you know, we're going to have to spend $200,000
Right.
on a 200 grand on, you know, to be a middle class, I think there's going to be less and less people, because I don't think 5 years from now the average person is going to be making 200 grand.
No, and I just don't see wages and everything else ramping up fast either, because that's going to create other problems.
Oh yeah, when they were talking about like, oh, you know, we should pay fast food workers, and I'm not saying they don't deserve it, $20 an hour, but what's going to end up happening, like I'm noticing now, like we went to Taco Bell that time, you know,
Yeah.
and we're like, okay, who do we?
No,
order?
we didn't. We didn't go to Taco Bell. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, there was a kiosk,
Yeah.
and I'm like, there's nobody here.
Right, because the kiosk he doesn't get tired. He doesn't ask for sick days. He doesn't call out sick. He doesn't quit. He may break, but.
So yeah, so now, okay, you raise the salary to $20 an hour or whatever, $30 an hour, whatever you want. But if it's a robot or a kiosk or something taking care of the order, you can make it $100 an hour.
Right. Look, this is another subject, but you know, you get into compression, salary compression. You know, and we dealt with this, you know, in my former career, where the line workers, firefighters, the medics, you know, driver operators, things like that, they were getting raises, and then the basic salary compression got to the point where officers you were making about 5% less than an officer was making. Mm-hmm. So there's zero incentive for somebody to move up into an officer rank, take on the additional responsibilities and the massive list of duties that come with the job as, you know, as an officer.
Right.
And for 5%, you know, for a little tiny bump in pay, same thing, you know, when I was retiring, for me to go to my next step, which was assistant chief, it was a 5% raise. Why would I do that? That doesn't make sense. So when we start doing these numbers and we start compressing things, these cause other problems. And that's what everybody has to think about.
Yeah. Anyways, that's part 2 of the video. Definitely check out part 1. And this was part 2. Do me a favor, consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. And we will talk to you in the next one. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.
Bye-bye.